Africa. My name is Jumoke Bamiboye, District Governor, Rotary District 9125 for 2020-2021. I will be the facilitator for this panel. I am joined by Dr. Tommy Bonman, Manager Sion Elwandle Node, Elian Wanjiku, Kenyan environmental activist, and Dr. Alex Lenfona, climate justice campaigner. Starting with Dr. Tommy Bonman. Please, can you introduce yourself and give us an overview of the work that you are doing in the environmental space?
I'm Tommy Bonman. I work for the South African Environmental Observation Network, and we are mandated to deploy, establish, and maintain a suite of environmental observatories, both in the terrestrial and the marine environment. So we maintain this in the long term to study how our environment are being changed as a result of global environmental change. And our activities stretch from mainland Africa all the way down to the continent of Antarctica.
Over to you, Dr. Alex. If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself as well?
Thanks very much for having me. The work that I'm doing is as campaigner with a nonprofit organization called 350africa.org, as well as serving as secretary for the South African Climate Justice Coalition. And in both of the roles that I'm working in, the big focus is on trying to build the people's movements that are necessary to push for change so that we can fight climate change, so that we can shift our energy systems away from relying on polluting and harmful energy sources towards cleaner energy sources. And one of the big campaigns that we have is around Green New Eskom, so transforming Eskom, South Africa's national utility, which is the biggest climate polluter on the African continent, which we're trying to turn into a force for climate justice rather than a force of pollution. Yeah.
Elian, please could you introduce yourself and the work that you do as well?
Okay, so I'm very fine, thank you for asking. So my name is Elian Wanjiku Kleisingavai. I am 10 years old, turning 11. I'm from the Pony Spectrum, and I am East Africa's youngest climate change ambassador and Kenya's youngest mashujaa. I fell in love with tree planting when I was 4 years old in kindergarten. We were doing a project on heroes, and these heroes included Martin Luther King, Wangari Maathai, Barack Obama, Hajiya Yorika, Uhuru Kenyatta, Nelson Mandela, many others. I really fell in love with what Wangari Maathai was doing, so I wanted to be like her, and I took the lead. So yeah, when we finished school, I went home and I kept on really annoying my mom and pestering her. Can I please plant a tree? Can I please plant a tree? Can I please plant a tree? But she was really annoyed with me. She got really annoyed. She just came to a point where she said tree planting is not a success. So I was like, what do you mean? So yeah, she just got really annoyed with me, and then she was like, okay, if you leave me, I'll give you the seed if you leave me alone. Weird enough, that seed was an orange seed, and it didn't end up smelling like an orange tree because when it was growing, because I'm sure I planted an orange seed, but it didn't smell like it. So I think that was the change that made me manage to be here today. So far, from that day on, I created my own account on all social media platforms. I made my own account, and I was recognized by many companies like Mtoto News, even a TV networks.
Then Dr. Tommy, just listening to the future, a 10-year-old doing this important work. In this work, there could be a potential for a lot of discrepancies between what the science says and what we believe or what we are taught to believe? What are some of the biggest mainstream misconceptions about environmental protection? I'm sure we want to know some of them.
Yes, well, I think the main, the first aspect is that governments need to, listen to what the scientists have to say. The scientists also need to get involved with the activists and the other environmentalists so that we can talk in a united voice. Because at the moment, people say different things, and that allows governments and the polluters and so forth to get away with what they are doing, and it's because we are not speaking with one voice. One aspect, for example, is the planting of trees, which is excellent because that is something that all governments should be focusing on, is reducing the amount of greenhouse gases we are putting into the atmosphere and increasing the amount of carbon sequestration, and trees do that very well. But from a scientific perspective, we must also be sure that we plant the correct trees in the correct areas. And it's not just, for example, big monocultures of one species of tree, because biodiversity is also important to the health of the people of this planet, and we need to preserve that at the same time.
That is a great segue into speaking a little bit about government's role in this. With you, Alex, in particular with the Justice Coalition, you are going up against a bureaucratic juggernaut that is government. What are some of the challenges that you face, and what are some of the key areas where government needs to play a role in environmental work?
Thanks very much. It's a really good question. I think when we talk about the politics of acting on environmental issues, one element is about making sure that we've got the science in the hands of policymakers, but the other is ensuring that they act. And I think here we need to be clear that there are strong vested interests. The companies that are the ones that are polluting have really powerful and strong holds on governments across the world. And that's certainly no different here in South Africa, where we see that big coal mining companies and those that really benefit from keeping us locked into polluting energy sources are resisting change, are capturing government departments that would normally be the spaces where you would hope you'd have scientifically and justice-informed policy that would respond to the multiple ecological and social crises that we're facing when it comes to our energy sector. And so that's a big part of why in our movement to try and push the likes of ESCOM for change, we are focusing a lot on building the political movements, building the political power needed to really push back against the capturing of our government by those interests that are holding us back from a cleaner, more affordable, more reliable energy future, and from action on the ecological crises that we face and that science is telling us we must act on.
I would like to swing back to Dr. Tommy. With what Alex has said, it's quite clear that large industries and governments have a major role to play. But where does personal agencies come in? What is our individual responsibility in all of this?
Yes, now individuals have got a very important role to play in climate action. And each individual's actions, speaks quite loudly. And the more of us that stand together and refuse to use plastic bags, that use clean energy and so forth, the better, because then it's only when we all have a united voice that governments and big industry actually listens to us. So it's very important that we stand together, but it's also important that we support the young generation, the next cohort of young people, and empower them so that their voices are not only heard, but are also listened to by those in power, because they are going to inherit the planet. And it's important that we listen to their concerns.
Elian, you've done a lot as an individual yourself. But what are you doing to get other young people like me and other Africans involved with your work and to educate them about the importance of your work? I will want to be part of it, and I know others will also want to be part of it.
I've been planting, and I've gone to 79 schools, and I've been planting seedlings in all those schools to make a difference and to empower the children that are in those schools. I've also been telling people to make a donation on my website. It's www.childrenwithnature.org. There's a donate button. I tell people and I force people, you need to donate this, because if we don't get the seedlings, I mean, how will we change the world? And I'm not saying this because I need the money. I'm saying this because the money is going to the trees. It's not going to me. I'm giving my respect to the trees. I'm not giving the respect to myself. I mean, even though I have to love myself first, I still have to love the trees, because what will I live in if I don't take care of the trees? I also do plastic pollution recycling with plastic bottles. Like, there's a time in a park I went to, I never left the park until I had cleared up all the trash I could possibly see. Because, I mean, I couldn't bear to sit down and see just plastic bottles all around the place, and I'm having a picnic. I mean, who wants a view? I really want to see beautiful flowers, like birds singing. Yeah, and like butterflies in the air.
Dr. Tommy, Africa has always seemingly lived in a harmonious balance with natural environments until perhaps the establishment of large industries. What can be done to get us back to just innately living in balance with environments?
No, I think it's a very good and valid question. I was part of the IPBES assessment for Africa, the biodiversity assessment, global assessment, and Africa stood out head and shoulders above the rest of the world because in Africa we've always lived much closer to nature. There's a lot stronger indigenous knowledge related to nature. And as a result of that, we've got a lot more natural areas. We live closer to nature. We need clean water. We do not depend on very expensive and fancy technology to clean our water always. So we look after our environment. And as a result, the environment in Africa is reasonably better protected and looked after than elsewhere in the world that is much more industrialized. So looking forward to the future, how can we on this planet live better? I think Africa is a potentially good example of how we can do that. Definitely, there's a lot of areas that we can improve. We definitely need to stop the destruction of our natural environment, but Africa can definitely set the example for the rest of the world. But I'll invite my other panelists to also give their comments.
Alex, would you like to add to that?
I think this is really important. When you look historically, Africa hasn't contributed majorly to issues like climate change. I think South Africa is a little bit of an anomaly here, where we're one of the biggest polluters, but for the majority of African countries, we haven't contributed to climate change as much as countries in the global north historically have. And so that means that on one hand, we need assistance to deal with the impacts for an issue that we haven't caused as much. But on the other hand, we also have an opportunity to leapfrog or move past the sort of more harmful, extractive and polluting forms of development that other countries have taken. And particularly now with renewable energy costs much cheaper than fossil fuels, with a lot of evidence showing that actually it's not only environmentally beneficial to act on issues like climate change, but is also socially and developmentally beneficial to act in that way, that Africa has an opportunity to both look to its past and to its indigenous knowledge in the present, as well as to look to these technologies of the future to create a form of development that is more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prosperous. And so I think we really do have that opportunity, but I think there's also a responsibility from countries in the global north that have contributed most to the climate crisis to provide funding to assist countries across the continent to make that transition and to also deal with the impacts of the climate crisis that they predominantly caused.
Alien, back to the future. Speaking of the future, what does the future hold for a 10-year-old environmentalist?
Where I think I'm gonna go is I want to leave a legacy first. In the future, I want to have a legacy of the girl that made Africa the green continent under the sun. Because Africa is literally the breadbasket of the world. I mean, we are the water well. We are the one, like, for example, in the UK, where does tea and coffee come from? It comes from Africa. Where does wheat come from? It comes from Africa. I mean, we have everything. And government don't really care about it. They just say, we own this land and nobody can have it. Well, if nobody can have it, I mean, then make a change to it, like make it something. Make it able, because I know that there was a problem of climate change and the animals never had anywhere to live. They were being pushed. And all these governments had these nature reserves showing off that they owned a land, you know, and they're not realizing that the animals didn't have anywhere to live. Elephants were being poached. Yeah, so in the future, I pretty much want to just see every extinct animal back to life, except for dinosaurs. I don't want dinosaurs back, because I think human mankind will just be done in a second. But I just want everything to be back to normal, how it was like in the Garden of Eden, just like pretty green, just everything green. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Africa has developed humongously. We have all the tribes in the world, we have all these indigenous tribes, and we're still able to build, skyscrapers.
Both of our doctors, Dr. Tommy and Dr. Alex, there's clearly a bright future ahead, but some of the issues are current and need to be solved now. What are some of the positives we can draw from now? Are we really winning the fight?
A few years ago, most people didn't believe in climate change. And I think luckily through experiencing climate change themselves, whether it's through drought or sea level rise or increasing temperatures globally over the last couple of years, people are realizing that, this is not a hoax. It is true, it is happening, and that something needs to be done. What I'm very hopeful about is the fact that the African governments have really climbed on board in fighting climate change. South Africa is a good example. We're one of a few countries in the world that invest quite heavily in scientific research to better understand the drivers of climate change as well as the biological response to these changes so that we can be better prepared for the future. And what also gives me hope is the fact that, humanity has stood together in the past, to stop the increasing growing hole in the ozone layer. And we've successfully, sort of fixed that problem, and the ozone is every year getting smaller and smaller. So as soon as there's a threat and the threat is perceived and people realize that it is real, we do tend to stand together. This threat, of course, is much bigger than anything else that we've faced. And the sooner we can all stand together and come up with the correct solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to sequester some of the carbon already in the atmosphere, and to try and reverse some of the changes that have taken place so that we can protect our environment and increase the number of green spaces so that our young people can go and play in the park and laugh and ride bicycles and enjoy the planet as it should be.
Yeah, thank you. I think yes and no. We're winning, but we're not winning fast enough, is probably how I would put it. If you look to a lot of the science around climate change in terms of how fast we need to act to avert some of the worst impacts and keep warming in line with what has been agreed to under the Paris Climate Agreement, we're not moving fast enough. And if we don't move faster, that means we're going to lock in some pretty devastating impacts. And we already have to a significant extent, right? And so climate change is very much a race, and we're racing against the atmosphere, which is quite unforgiving, unlike politics, which is an art of compromise. The physics of the atmosphere does not compromise; it just delivers warming and impacts. And so, we need to move a lot faster, and there is the possibility to do that. The technologies have developed at an incredible rate in terms of being able to implement solutions. And at the same time, political movements are growing. Pre-pandemic, we know that some of the biggest social movements were young people taking to the streets demanding climate action. Those movements haven't gone away. They've maybe gone into a bit of a digital hibernation or a different phase, as we've obviously had to do things differently from COVID. But there's an urgent need for us to ensure that any recovery from COVID is a recovery that puts ecological and social justice at the heart of it. Because otherwise, the studies tell us that this really is the last window to keep to those Paris Climate Agreement targets. And so if we miss this window, we miss that opportunity and we move on to a much more dangerous and warming world. So we can win, but and we can achieve climate justice in our lifetimes, and we need to. But if we don't push back against the political interests that are trying to lock us into a polluting recovery, then I am afraid that we may miss that opportunity. So the future is still in our hands to determine whether we do that or not.
Elian, what would you like to say to the older generation that are in this event right now, listening and watching you?
I'm not the servant, okay? Even though children can make the change, you still have to do something because you guys, well, you made children, basically, for those who have children. You made them, and as parents, you need to be their warriors, and they'll be your warriors. I mean, children can't always be doing the work. Like, for example, let me say, my mother sometimes, she tells me to plug in her iPad, she tells me to plug in her phone, she tells me to do this, she tells me to do that. And sometimes I just think, okay, I'll do it, but I need to, So yeah, I'm just telling you guys that you also need to protect your world. I mean, it's not the children that are just gonna change it. I mean, we need help. As a lot of people say, we're just children. We're still growing into the humanity of the world. We don't know, some children don't know what the world really is. They pretty much just know the good side of the world, but they also don't know the bad side. So I'm just telling all these old fossil fuels, you need to help us. Like, we need a change because it's your world, not just ours. Like, you were made to be in this world. You have to protect it.
Gentlemen, any closing remark as we get ready to draw the curtains? I'm sure you have something to tell us to close this session.
Yes, I can also say maybe, to bring it all back to Rotary possibly. Rotary is a good organization, to take this climate action further because they're a global network. They consist of a network of specialists and professionals, young people and old people across all the countries of the world. They've got established clubs, they've got established projects. And if there's one organization that can talk with one voice and use all their vast resources like they have in the past to fight polio, they could potentially make a big difference if they unite, stand together and fight the good fight.
Thank you very much, Africa. It was nice listening to Dr. Alex, Dr. Tommy, and Elian. on the way forward for our own environment. Thank you.